Okay, this morning, I'm debating on the direction that we're going to take. And the reason I'm saying that is because I feel like a bridge has been crossed. I feel like we have not entered a place, but have become aware of a different place of being than which we were aware of even just a few days ago. And maybe it's just me who's experiencing it. I don't know.
Evelyn is too.
Okay.
Because you are pastor, you attend your church.
Oh, okay.
No,
and-
because she changed the word from bad to young, you know.
No, I was just going off of what she said, but she did do that.
Yeah. That makes you president of the missionary.
Oh, what?
That's why they call you number one.
But I want to just talk to us. Let us talk about where we are in the experiences. I'm not talking about necessarily personal experiences, but experiences wherein we feel or sense something different. Does that make sense?
Yes.
Because I do. I really sense that. See, the difference with me is this. In the past few weeks, I have felt very settled. While I have been coming in contact with other people who have felt totally out of sorts. Even during the period, the last few weeks, especially that first week, when the muscles in my back were so tight, I stayed in bed all week. I still did not feel unsettled. I felt extremely calm. Even though it was painful, I still felt calm. And it seems as though when I get to the place where I began to feel a bit unsettled, that's when everything for everyone else begins to be calm. And I'm beginning to understand the reason possibly for that is because when everyone else begins to feel calm, I move to another place. It's like you're on this rung of the ladder, and I'm on the next rung.
Are you saying mankind in general, or just the people you cover?
Well, actually, primarily the people I cover,
Okay.
but mankind in general. And see, when I talk about the people I cover, it's like we're like a rock in a lake, or a rock in a pond. The ripples comes out from us. Whatever we feel, it ripples. So the settling that I'm beginning to experience with the people I cover is also representative of the rippling effect. Now, what I am experiencing when I talk about a sense of being settled, because of being in a place where I'm more aware of who I am, I'm more aware of what's going on, then that creates unsettling, creates calmness for you until I begin to deal with or get calm where I am, then you begin to get unsettled. Does that make sense?
Why is it vice versa?
Well, it's like that because if you let me do it from the perspective of comfort zone. Whenever you get comfortable, right, then I'm not comfortable because I moved to a different place.
Okay.
And when you get comfortable, I'm not comfortable. That in that regard.
Okay.
Now, when I say discomfort, I don't mean discomfort in the classical sense of it. I mean it from the perspective of sensing things that are changing. Not changing, things that we are becoming aware of. Because if we really think about it, nothing ever changes. we just become aware of what is. And we have all these opportunities to live in all these different worlds. We can live in a world of constant flux, which means that we're in a world where we're constantly looking for who we are. And there's always ebb and flow in that world. Or we can live in a world where we accept who we are right now and desire not to go any further. And there is a sense of false calmness in that world. Or we can live in a world where we are extremely critical of everything we don't believe in. And we create a sense of negative energy. So there's all these worlds that we can live in. And guess what? You can live in all of them at the same time. That's what we mean by being one thing to this person or some, you know. The objective is to make every effort to be the same person regardless of what you are. And you can't do that by pretending to be somebody you're not. I have struggled for the last couple of weeks, more specifically for the last week, and in actuality exactly for the last week more specifically, to sit and write concerning this whole idea that I have been shown concerning racism. It's not working for me. I can't, for some reason, put it on paper. I can't seemingly write it out. The understanding of racism as we have discussed it, as we have lived it, is very, very difficult for some reason for me to put pen to paper and write it. I want to know, I want to say rather, that I would, if we make every effort to stop talking about racism, to stop talking about racist events, and begin to see them as opportunities for unification. When I say unification, I'm talking about see them as an opportunity to bring everything back to where it's supposed to be, back to the beginning. And what I mean by that is give me a paper towel, please. What I mean by that is, how many of you have heard? I have the stuff to spray. I just need a paper towel. How many of you have heard about the racist joke that the federal judge made concerning a bunker? Have you heard about that? The federal judge says he sends in an email to his friends, a joke, and it says that this little boy, and I'm paraphrasing of course, this little boy goes to his mama and say, "Mama, why are you white and I'm black?" And mama says to Barack, after that kind of a party, you're lucky that you're not barking.
You're not what?
You don't bark. Implying that she slept with a dog.
Dang.
You see? Instead, I need to know. I'm going to. So you see what I'm talking about? That's okay. So you see what I'm talking about?
Yes.
Um,
Well, yeah. You know it's racism because I've never seen people be so disrespectful to a United States president.
and you're absolutely right. And he's not a
It's
United
like
States.
incredible.
And it's because he's not a United States president. It's only the United States president if the United States respect him as that.
If the what?
If he's respected as that. You see where I'm coming from?
Well,
To them, he's not a president. Now, and this is the thing I'm trying to say. We cannot allow that. We can't buy into that. We we can't buy into the racism, because what happens is when we do that, if we understand that, as we have done earlier, that we have Adam, right? Right? And out of Adam, what we call the fall, comes the African, right? And out of him comes all these other races, because according to archaeology, that's the first man, right? Huh? So out of that comes all of these thoughts, right? Now, if we buy into racism, then what happens is we forget about everybody else. See,
Who is that?
Japanese, Chinese, we forget about everybody else. We don't pay them any attention. Guess who else we don't pay any attention to? Us. Because we are focused on racism. You see?
Yeah.
And the thing that we talk about the most becomes the things that we give the most life to. Now that it has reared its head, how do you chop the head off of it? You chop the head off of it by not giving it life, by refusing to give it life. So, what is the primary objective? The primary objective that we have is to move everything to the place where it was in beginning, right? Because beginning is somewhere here, isn't it? Isn't it? Man was placed in the garden east of Eden. Is that not what it says?
Yeah.
Huh? Okay, if man was placed in the garden east of Eden, then that's Eden, right? And this is east of Eden, right? If that's east, this is south, that's north, and that's west, right? Let's just do it in geographical terms, okay? And I'm going back up here in a moment. He was placed in the garden east of Eden, right? Which means that he was placed in the garden in front, and he was placed in a garden in front of Eden. This is the garden. This is not Eden, it's the garden. Are you with me? This is Eden. Eden is the place of pleasure. It's not talking about physical pleasure. Pleasure is talking about spiritual pleasure. It's talking about realizing the unicity that you have with the one who created you. Got it?
Yes.
So, what is the purpose of the garden? What's the purpose of the garden?
To grow nourishing food. To grow something.
To grow, to nourish, right? Okay, so the purpose of the garden is to bring about new life, isn't it?
If it's a Wednesday, yeah.
Okay, so the new life is supposed to be brought about here, right? Once the new life is brought about, then the opportunity is presented to enter the place of pleasure or to move away from it. Isn't it? Is that not free will?
Okay, yeah.
So the opportunity is to move into the place of pleasure, where you will have the unicity or the oneness with the one who created you, right? Or you find your pleasure someplace else. Are you with me?
Yes.
So the pleasure was realized or sought rather in a different direction. So if the pleasure is sought in a different direction, then that means that the pleasure is moving away from the east towards the west. Right? The further away it gets, the more it becomes necessary to develop thoughts that will sustain it. Examples. When you leave home at the age of 21 or 25 or whenever you leave, right? You began to develop thoughts that will sustain you. The thoughts that you had while you were home will not sustain you. Because now that you've grown up, you got to pay for a roof over your head. So your thoughts now, before that, you didn't have that thought. Now you have to buy food. Before that, you didn't have that thought. Because while you were in the garden, which we call in home, right? All of these things were provided for you. Now you have to make a decision about how you're going to cover your body. Now you have to begin to make decisions about how you're going to have an income in order for all these things to be sustained. Wherein, while you were home, that was not necessary. Are you with me? Mm-hmm. So the further you move away, the more varied these thoughts become. Right? Now, if you move away from home, and as you move, your thoughts become varied. And if for any reason you focus on one thought, and that thought becomes the thought of pleasing yourself, right? Now, the next thing is, where do you find your pleasure?
In things.
It may be, it may not be. It may be in other people. You see?
Yeah.
So the question becomes, where do you find your thoughts? So wherever you find your thoughts of pleasure, that becomes your focus. Which means that now the clothes that you need, to cover your back, the food that you need to sustain you, and the shelter that you need becomes secondary. Am I making sense to you so far?
Yeah.
It becomes secondary, doesn't it?
Because secondary to what?
Pleasure. To your
Which
desire.
is what?
To whatever you focus on the most.
Oh, okay.
And that's your pleasure.
But what if I focus on those the most?
If you focus on these the most, then this becomes secondary to it. My point is this: wherever your priority becomes, everything else becomes secondary to your priority. Got it?
Yeah.
Now, if while you're leaving there, at some point, your priority becomes spiritual, then all these other things become secondary to your priority, to spiritual, right? Mm-hmm. Once the spiritual becomes your priority, now you have a choice. The choice is whether you will seek the spiritual based upon what you left or what you feel like you left behind, or will you seek the spiritual based upon the religion that you've been taught. Most of us sought the spiritual based upon the religion. You know why? The reason we did that is because when we sought the spiritual based upon the religion that promised us all of this, the food, the clothes, the shelter, the play, all of that. That's what the religion promised us. Trust God, you're going to have a job. Trust God, you're going to have nice things. Trust God. I mean, that's what we were taught.
Yeah.
Now, how many of you believe that that's still true? Trust God and you're going to have all these things.
Well, I believe that if I trust God, I don't have to worry about those things. So I don't have to focus on those things.
How many of you other than Barbara and Sheldon
I would believe with those two.
I'll be the odd one. I struggle with.
Trying to recruit missionaries.
I'm at a point where I'm struggling with, do I still believe that? Even though I'm learning something new, I gotta do that.
Right. Now, religion teaches us this, right?
Mm-hmm.
And we buy into it. But you know why it's so easy to buy into it? Because it sounds so right. And the scripture does not say that. Neither does the scripture say if I trust God, everything is going to be taken care of.
No, it doesn't.
It doesn't say that.
Oh, well then,
What, girl?
if that's the case, why the scripture say, the Lord is my shepherd, I have no lack?
How does the Lord become your shepherd?
Because of my trust, because of my belief. Because through experiences,
Things you do.
through the things I've experienced.
Let's go to this one.
And don't trip me up either.
I'm not going to stick my foot out and trip you up.
That's the one I was thinking of.
So, rather, religion teaches us, trust God, and we go get all these things, right?
Mm-hmm.
So what we end up doing is seeking these things. By way of job, education,
Mm-hmm.
marriage, whatever. Am I making, you see where I'm coming from?
Yes.
Get you a good education, all this other stuff will happen. Now, if we did it the way the scriptures say do it, right?
Mm-hmm.
Seek ye first the kingdom of Elohim. What it's actually saying is, look within yourself and find the principles of life that Elohim has put in you.
Okay.
And when you find these principles of life that Elohim has put in you, then all these other things will be added. You won't have to search for them.
Okay.
Does that make sense?
Yes.
So, what has happened essentially is that we have given life to the spiritual because that has become our priority. Up until this point, we have not been taught how to give life to the spiritual. Does that make sense?
Yes.
Because we have always thought that we cannot see the kingdom of God until we die.
That's true.
And well, we thought we were giving life to the spiritual that we knew.
And we
And we did give life
did give life to the spiritual that we knew. And just because we gave life to the spiritual that we knew and our intentions were good, it didn't change the principles.
That's true.
It does not matter how good your intentions are. Jump off the roof, you go hit the ground. You see?
Yeah.
Gravity doesn't pull you to the ground. Gravity pushes you to the ground. You're going to hit the ground. You don't change the principles because your intentions are good. Good intentions with the right principles is what moves you forward.
That's true.
Can you see that?
Mm-hmm.
Good intentions with the right principles is what move you forward. If you have good intentions and your principles are not right, but you are searching for the right principles, then your intentions will lead you to someone who can show you the right principles. But if your intentions are good and you've latched onto the wrong principles, then nothing changes. It only gets worse. And then you begin to blame God. Does that make sense?
Yes.
So if you take that,
So we blame though the God that we thought
One
was
we
supposed to
created.
give us all the pleasurable life,
Yes.
pleasurable things, pleasurable
whatever. And don't get bent all out of shape. When you hear people say, God told me to stand on this corner and preach. I had someone to share something with me just yesterday. And one of the things they shared with me was that there was this person who believed that she needed to shut herself off from her spouse and be with God. And she would do this for days at a time. And he would try to tell her, the spouse, that this should not be. And he would try to get counseling. It did not work out. And he eventually went to her and stood in front of her and told her, I can't take it anymore, and blew his brains out. And she called the person who they had gone to counseling. And the person went, and she was standing there saying, don't touch him. God told me he gonna raise him up. And the top of his head goes. And finally convinced her it ain't happening. So she began to devolve into a life of drugs. And it was through her addictions and through her nearly dying that she really saw the true God. But look what she had to go through.
Wow.
You see where I'm coming from?
Yes.
Now, when you see someone standing on the corner preaching, or you see someone run up and down the aisle and they say God told them to do that, leave them alone. Because you're not going to convince them that he didn't. And to them, God did tell them to do that. The God that told them to do that is the God who stands in the pulpit. This woman had been told to do what she did in terms of closing herself off by her pastor, by a pastor. You see where I'm coming from? This is one of the things, and I'm going to get back to this in a moment, but I need to lay this foundation, I think. This is one of the things that we miss dramatically. We call it obeying authority. But it is actually worshiping God. And the God who is being worshipped is the one who's in the pulpit. And the subsidiary gods are those who support the pulpit. Deacons. And the God that the pulpit and the deacons worship is the building and the money. And they don't even know it. They really don't know it. Keep the building beautiful. Don't stand. Don said something to me. He said to me, when you came to Mount Calvary, I was a little boy. And one time we had a program and you allow all the kids to come up into the pulpit and say little speeches and do what they had to do. And he said, I was scared. I had never been up there before. Because they told us to stay out the pulpit, it was sacred. And I said to him, I was told the same thing, but I realized something. That pulpit is no more sacred than the floor that the pews sit on. None of it is sacred. I remember reading the scripture where God says to Moses, do not build an altar, because when you stand on an altar, men will look under your garment. Never will forget that.
Who said that?
God told Moses that. Don't build an altar.
That man will look under his
Your,
garment.
your garment. In other words,
Mm.
when you get too high above the people,
Mhm.
you will show those private parts that would embarrass you.
That been happening a lot.
You see what I'm talking about?
Which means like your thoughts,
No,
or just,
no,
oh, real,
for real.
oh.
Told you, I ain't talking about the spiritual thing up in here. I'm down here. I'm still down here.
Yeah. Well,
So what we've done, and I think what we are now, is in that place where we are having to make some real decisions about the reality of the God who tells people to say things like, I'm blessed and favored in the Lord. Or tell people, all you got to do is name it and claim it, you know? And when they say that I'm calling things that were not as though they were, they did hear God say it. But they did not hear Elohim say it. They heard this God in the pulpit say it. That's who told them. What you need to do is call things that are not as though they were. And every one of you sitting in front of me knows the truth. Because every one of us have heard that before.
yes, sir.
And every one of us have heard it from the mouth of someone that's in a pulpit. Have we not?
Yes.
So, you cannot call things that are not as though they were because you heard it from the God that's in the pulpit. Am I making sense to you?
Yes.
So, how do we deal with that? How do we take the life out of this God? How do we do that?
Audrey, he's looking at you.
How do we do that?
Trick question.
I know.
A trick question.
But isn't it like anything else? It's what you purpose to focus on that you give life to. So it's like the Eddie Long thing. The most recent thing with Eddie Long.
I'm listening.
We talked about it, and what we tried to do was to pull the truth out of it, and then we left it alone and went on. Or we didn't. It's like a dog with a bone. I mean, he will stay there and he will just machinate on that bone forever and ever and ever. That's what gives him pleasure. And we try not to do that.
So, we got to stop trying not to and do it. We got to stop worshiping it.
So focusing on it is worshiping it.
Surrendering
In a
to it.
sense.
Surrendering to the authority of it, obeying it, or reverencing it. All that's worship. All that's worship. We have to begin to recognize what's in that pulpit the same way Jesus recognized the rabbis in the synagogue. Vipers. The same way he recognized the Sadducees and the Pharisees. Dogs. Did he not say, go tell those dogs, I have to be about my Father's business? I don't have time for that. In other words, we have to recognize that this leadership is not for the benefit of the people who it proposes to lead. It is for the benefit of themselves and themselves alone. Got that?
Yes.
Now, why is it for their benefit and for their benefit alone? Simply because they get pleasure from it. They get pleasure from being able to rule over people. They get pleasure from being able to do as they please. They get pleasure from the checks that they get and from the prestige that they get by virtue of them being worshipped. Now let me show you how simple and easy it is to do that without realizing it. When I come to Barbara's house for dinner, nobody eats before me because I'm the preacher. All these kids running around, you see? When I come to Janice's church, she set up a table in a separate room for the Reverend Sumter and the Reverend Richard. Right? When I walk into a building, all the seats are taken, and everybody began to scramble like ants to make sure I find a seat. But when my 84-year-old mama walks in, she stands in the corner. Nobody's scrambling unless somebody just happens to get up and find her. Is that not what happens?
Yes.
That's nothing but worship.
Mm.
And the gods in those pulpits calls it obedience or respect for authority. That's not what that is at all. If I want you to respect authority, I must exert the authority in a respectful way. If I make you feel obligated to respect me, you don't really respect me.
It's true.
You're doing that obligation as opposed to doing what you feel is right. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
So, if you really, really want to begin to expose the undergarment of the one standing on the altar, then take away what they worship. Take away the building and take away the money. They don't worship the people.
No, God will call them somewhere else.
Yes. The people simply represents the building and the money. Because without the people, there is no building and there is no money. So they just represent their resources for that. Now, that is the reason religion has taught us to seek pleasure. Got it?
Yes.
And that is the reason it is so difficult for us to move from that place of seeking pleasure and begin to truly seek the spiritual. Now, this is what happens. When you begin to seek the spiritual with good intentions, your true desire is never to know who you are. It doesn't begin then. Your true desire begins to know God. Every one of us in this room begin a desire. I want to really know who God is, did we not? And when you began to look for or to search for who God really is, that is when you began to find who you are.
You just answered something that was going around in my mind. There's this thing, know God, know you, know me. N-O, know God,
Yeah.
know me. And then K-N-O-W, know God.
Yeah, they know me.
Know me.
Yeah.
Because I was thinking, know God, N-O, know me. And then K-N-O-W, know me, know K-N-O-W, know God.
Yeah.
But really it's
It's the
still,
reverse. Yes.
did I just confuse you?
No.
No.
Okay.
You passed the church, you see it. The other thing is, if you watch it, the God in the pulpit will do whatever it takes to stay popular. But you can always tell the God in the pulpit who has no connection to the God who created him or her. How can you tell that? Because the very things that they find repulsive in a spiritual way, eventually they began to justify their existence.
For instance.
For example, Lent. There was a time when no Protestant church would acknowledge Lent. It was a Catholic thing. The only reason we went to Mardi Gras when I was in college was to have a good time. We weren't going for no Catholic stuff.
We
But
know
nothing
that
to business
already.
about it at all.
We know that already.
Get you a bunch of beads and hang out. Now, you began to see the very people who talked about, and still at sometimes talk about, Catholicism is not what they call not Christianity, but actually not what the scripture talks about. Because its origin is in Babylon. These same people are now having Fat Tuesday dinners and giving up stuff for Lent. When they never did that before, they're going back to their mother. They're going back to their roots. This is more indicative of what they really represent than it is of what they really believe. They represent this system of Catholicism, but they don't know what they believe. And that is the reason you don't get answers when you raise questions, because they don't know what they believe. So, when you begin to move away from the whole concept of religion in terms of the way religion is presented in this diagram, and you begin a true introspection of where to find God and where to find the window through which you can see God. That is when you began to raise questions about everything that you've been taught. You do not move towards beginning without asking questions. How can a man enter his mother's womb again? What does it mean to be born again? Are these not questions Nicodemus raised?
Mm-hmm.
You began to raise questions about what you've been taught. And when you begin to raise questions about what you've been taught, you're not getting answers. So the next thing that you do is begin to search for answers on your own. And if you're not careful, you will move so far away from what you have been taught until you will move into a place of isolation from your desire for God and from what you have been taught. If you're careful and listen, you will be guided to answers that you're searching for. And you will find out that those answers are in you. And in guiding you towards those answers, you will migrate towards someone who can teach you the difference between being spiritual and what this religious stuff is about. You will begin to see the esoteric understanding of baptism, the esoteric understanding of communion, the esoteric understanding of this non-existent thing called church, the esoteric understanding of what's called Christianity. All these things, you will begin to taste it, and you will not begin to understand it immediately. It will all seem foreign to you, but it's something inside of you that say, this feels right. And now you begin to see things that you never saw. One of the most fascinating things to me is that I've seen people who did not do well academically at all, but they can articulate these principles better than people with several degrees. So it's not about intellect.
Right.
It's about desire.
Well, I'm wondering about that because, yes, some people start to ask questions and then they start to search. But the other side of that, though, is some people, when they start to ask questions and they start to search, they end up believing they need to go out and start their own church and be their own pastor or whatever. And then they go through the circle all over again. But how do those people really get to hear the truth?
What they're actually hearing is themselves.
Yeah.
And they truly don't believe that there's anything different than what they're walking away from. Most of them are not walking away from because they don't believe the doctrines. They're walking away because they don't believe the way the doctrines are being presented or represented. That's why they walk away.
Right.
Because when they walk away with the same doctrines. They just present them differently.
Mm-hmm.
But the underlying belief is the same. There's nothing different spiritually about it.
Right. That's what I'm saying. How do they get to the truth?
By being honest with themselves and realizing that I'm no different than what I left. The only difference in what I left, instead of being out of church at 12:30, we're out at 2:30. The only difference in what I left is that now we're speaking in tongues and they didn't. But the scripture says 1, 2 at the most with an interpreter. So they're not really looking at the book, to check themselves. So they're actually not moving towards the truth because they're not really looking for the truth. They're looking for something different.
Yeah, it just seems to me that they perpetuate the same thing, really.
Yes. And the reason I can speak so adamantly or so effective about that is because I have been down that road. I did it. I walked away from what is called the traditional setting and went into a charismatic setting and began charismatic ministry and began to realize that this is no different than what I left. It has to be more than this, and if it's not any more than this to what I'm teaching, it's time for me to leave it all alone because I'm misleading people. So what happens? I end up one day at Christian Supply, and I went to the research section at Christian Supply, and I pulled out a concordance, and I sat in the floor with that concordance and a Bible. I had no idea as to how to use a concordance when I took it off the shelf. But it didn't take 5 minutes or less to figure it out because it's that simple. And I began to look at words in that concordance, sitting in that floor. And I became so enthralled by what I was seeing until before I realized it, I had sat in that floor for almost 4 hours, just looking up words. And it was at that point that I began to see that be it charismatic or what we call traditional, both of them are the same. But there is something in this book that tells us something that none of us have really seen before. And when I began to see that, that is when I began the journey towards truth. And the most difficult thing, Audrey, is this. When you see that, you will never move beyond seeing it until you stand in front of your people and say, up to this point, I have been teaching you what I have been taught. But there is something in this book far beyond what I've been teaching you. I apologize for having taught you wrong. But I promise you, from this day forward, I will only teach what's in the book. Who wants to do that? And run the risk of losing the pleasure.
Because if we hadn't found this place, everyone might have her little church over there in the corner.
Everybody going to Ellen Church.
Might have 10 other little churches on the corner.
And you're right. And what happened is, we have to believe that Jesus did not show up until the fullness of time, right? Until it was time for him to show up. And this little thing on the corner rose at the right time. And if we were to go down the line asking, how did you get here? How did you get here? How did you get here? The difference of the stories. But it was a desire to know. That's the underlying reason for every one of us. After the adventure at Beulah, I'm done. I was done. And I'm saying I'm just going to do things the way that I'm doing things. And Bessie called and asked if I would do a Bible study at her house. And that's how all this got started. And I thought it was simply a Bible study. I had no idea that I was about to have a serendipitous experience. But that's exactly what it was. And quite frankly, I never will forget when I came down to preach, I dealt with a message that I had been very apprehensive about dealing with anyway. And when I dealt with that message, the reason I dealt with it is because when I was sitting there in that center seat, the voice was telling me what I had to do, and I made a decision. I'm going to say it. If they accept it, fine. If they don't, I'm not supposed to be here. And doggone it, they accepted it, and still wouldn't they? But the message was, I say that ye are gods. And I dealt with it from what it meant at that time. The surface, what I saw. He was not talking about angels. He's talking about Elohim. That's how I dealt with it. But I did not deal with it from the perspective of us lowering ourselves less than who we are. Because I didn't see it at the time. If I had, I probably wouldn't have been accepted. But But my point is this, to Audrey, is when you move away from, you have to move away from with an open mind. You can't move away from with your mind closed as to what you're going to find.
Which is what truth is. Truth is an opening.
There you
All
go.
in the circle.
Yes. Because if you move whatever you're looking for, that's what you're going to create. That's what you're going to find. But if you leave with an open mind, then that opening, that truth, will find you. And the very thing that you are seeking to apprehend, apprehends you. So, having said all of that, once we recognize this for what it is, moving away from the garden, moving away from the new life that we're supposed to be creating in abundance, moving away from the royal priesthood that we are, moving away from the wealth of wisdom that we have, moving away from all of those things. Did you hear that? We left royalty. We left wealth. We left the newness of life. Moving away from all of that. Returning to it is not turning around walking back. Returning to it is recognizing what all of this is and seeking to bring the light into the earth so all of this can be revealed to anybody who's looking for it, regardless of where they are. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
And I'm going to move up here in a second.
So mankind had became prodigal son at the fall, at the beginning of the fall.
I don't like the term prodigal son, and I'm going to tell you why.
Okay.
Prodigal son does not appear in the Bible at all, because there was prodigality in both, in the son, both sons and the daddy.
Okay.
You know, all of them were looking for something.
So what term? did
So
you-
we have become strangers in our own land.
Okay.
That's what we become, strangers in our own land. And when I say strangers in our own land, I'm talking about strangers to the consciousness that we were created to be. Got it?
Okay.
Jacob wrestled with himself.
Mm-hmm.
And when Jacob wrestled with himself and recognized the light in himself, he says, now keep in mind he's wrestling at night, and during a period of confusion. All he saw was confusion, and he was wrestling with that confusion, and he saw the light in that confusion. And he said, I will not let you go until you tell me your name. And the angel did not tell him the name. He says, what is your name? He said, Jacob. He said, your name shall no longer be Jacob, it shall be Israel. Israel means to move straight to God, or those who will rule as God. Are you with me? Mm-hmm. So when you wrestle within yourself, you go either hang on to the confusion because you're comfortable with it, and you'll remain Jacob, the supplanter, the deceiver, and the one you're deceiving is yourself. Or you will hold on to that light, and it will touch your thigh. And when it touches the thigh, it talks about the descendants of thought that come from your loins. Because the same word that's used for thigh in that wrestling match is the word that's used for the 66 descendants of Jacob when Jacob was leaving his father-in-law. So it's talking about when it touches your thigh, that which comes out of your thigh, is your loins, is talking about the consciousness, the thoughts that come from your loins. So here you begin wrestling with this, and that's where the questions come. That's where the questions come. You can get the questions and end up Esau. Never change. Or you can wrestle with it and get the questions come and you get an answer, Israel. Am I making sense?
Yes.
And when you get the answer about journey that you are the journey straight to God, or you are one who will rule as God, when you get that answer that Yah, Israel, that you are moving straight towards God, then something changes. You still have a desire for pleasure. But your pleasure is not in the things. Got it? Your pleasure now is in the wisdom that's behind everything that is. So when you hear something that you never heard before that has a moving effect on your life in terms of changing you, or one of those aha moments, you mull over it, you ponder it for days. And it begins to change your life, and you look back at all of these things and you see they really don't mean anything. The only thing that matters is what's in me. Who am I? That's what matters. The breath that you are is what matters. And then when you get to that, something else happens. Once you get to that place of realizing that your pleasures are not the things, are not found in the things that you created. Because that's what things are, right? Your pleasure is found in what created you. Wisdom. You were created by the wisdom of Elohim. Were you not?
Yes.
Hello? That's what we gave her, right?
Yes.
So now, guess what? When we find out that we were created by the wisdom of Elohim, we also find out that any number of these religious principles were designed to keep us from seeing who we really are. They have become distractions. No drinking, no cursing, no smoking. All these things are harmful, and you shouldn't do them. But at the same time, they keep you, they are a distraction because you're going to hell. Let me show you what I'm saying.
Please be clear on that.
Let me show you what I'm saying. Whitney Houston dies, people talk about her being with the Lord. And other people get angry because they say she's a drug addict, she went to hell. Got it? Preacher gets killed. And everybody knows what the preacher was involved in, or the preacher dies, and everybody knows that he was an alcoholic, or that he pilfered from the church and anybody else he could pilfer from, or whatever you call the other word. Everybody knows this, but because of who he is, he went to hell. You see what I'm talking about? Or somebody who's prominent in the church dies, and everybody knows that he touched every little girl he could put his hands on in the church. But when he dies, he's with the Lord. Now, if I were to take all the things that Whitney did and list them on this board, and take all the things that the church does and list them on this side, and don't put a head on either one of them, and ask you to choose which one was Whitney and which one was the church, you would find that what Whitney did was more of what Jesus did than any church that we've ever attended. Simply because she had an issue fighting with substance abuse and people manipulating her doesn't mean she went to hell. As a matter of truth, she lived in hell and did everything she could to create heaven for other people. You see the clarity there? That's what I'm talking about. That's what I'm talking about. Now, when when you find out, when you realize that the pleasure is surely the desire that you should have, but the desires for pleasure are exclusive of these things. I'm sorry, not spiritual. These things, right? Because when you seek the principles of Elohim, these things are added. And the reason they are added is not for you to be a big shot and not for you to talk about how much God bless you, but for you to be able to move beyond where you are and help other people do the same thing. Because when you look at the scriptures, and it says to and God says to Abraham, those who bless you, I will bless them. What is he talking about? What is he talking about? Is there anyone who would like to venture an answer to that?
What was the question again?
Where were you? At the missionary meeting?
Oh, another plane, but go ahead.
Missionary plane?
I asked, when God said to Abraham, I will bless those who bless you, what was he saying?
Did you hear him that time?
No, she was hitting you. Well, what was he saying? What did he mean? Was he talking about he gonna get a new camel? Yeah. Was he talking about he gonna get a new wardrobe? Or he gonna have a huge bank account? No. When he says, I will bless those who bless you, guess what he was saying?
I'll take care of those.
No. I will express adoration and reverence for those who express adoration and reverence for you. That's what he was saying. Look up that word bless. And we use that word like we're going to get something. That's not what he was talking about. You do get something. But the something that you get is adoration and reverence, is respect, is honor. I will honor those who honor you. That's what he's talking about. What is it all
Doesn't all
about?
this stuff come with the honor?
All the stuff come with the seeking. With the seeking.
Okay, so what comes with honor?
Whatever you need. Because half the stuff we got we don't need. Whatever you need. See, if you are seeking to honor someone in order to get the stuff, that's the wrong reason. You're not going to get it.
Yeah.
But if you honor someone simply because honor is due, then you don't worry about what's going to come. You understand what I'm saying? You don't concern yourself with the stuff, ever. Because the moment you concern yourself with the stuff, you revert to religion. Because that's what religion does. It teaches us to cherish the stuff. God is blessing us because we raised $1 million last year. Well, what did you do with it? Well, we did an addition to the building. We bought 2 more vans. And we invested in some more land because we go build a new church and we raised $2 more million. But sir, I talked to some of your members. And through no fault of their own, they're unemployed. And their houses are one step from being in foreclosure. So what about them? Well, you see, they need to pray and trust God to help them get through this time.
But we will send the missionaries by once a week with food.
We might. But first of the month, we definitely go send communion. Now, this is what happened. This guy told Ron about an incident that happened at this church. incident. This man been in this church for years, working, running tithes and offering, of course. And he lost his job and fell on hard times. One of the officers found out about it and went before the church and asked them to lift the love offering for him so his house would go into foreclosure and they could have food accepted. They did it. Boom, they gave it to him. A few months later, the same officer ran into the man at the store and said, I haven't seen you since you got the love offering. What happened? He said, I ran into the pastor and he told me that he knew that I was going through a hard time. But when I got to the place that I could run the tithe and offering, then I could come back.
Oh.
See how deeply that cuts?
Wow.
It's all about the building and the money.
Wow.
Yeah,
And it happens all the time.
all the time.
Yeah.
All
Oh
the
my
time.
God.
Why do you think financial reports are put out? Financial reports are put out to embarrass people. So anyway, let's get up here before I get too long. Pleasure. We can back here about being too long. Pleasure. When we see pleasure from the right perspective, when we see pleasure through the eye instead of the eyes, got that?
Yes.
When we see pleasure through the eye, then we began to look for a way to move beyond the contradictions and the distractions, primarily the distractions. The first distractions that we move beyond are these, the things, right? Mm-hmm. Then what happens? We think because we have moved beyond the distraction of the things, we're ready to move forward, don't we? You there? Don't we? But you know what we find out? That the things that we move out of our vision are the things that we see, that we taste, that we smell, that we touch, that we hear, that we feel, right? Those are the things of pleasure that we began to move out of our vision. They're not important. We began to tell ourselves that. That's not important.
Mm-hmm.
And we think when we do that, that we're okay. Because that stuff doesn't matter. So now, we're on our way on this chariot of enlightenment to the place where we began, of the place of beginning. But it doesn't work like that. Because when that happens, we find out that all of these things that we have put behind us, supposedly, all these physical things that apply to our senses, all of these things are simply manifestations of our thoughts. The things that we do not see. So now we have to deal with the distractions that we don't see. And the distractions that we don't see are the distractions that we experience. Please write that. I probably won't be able to say that again.
Wait a minute, hold that thought.
See, Bob's not typing today, boy. She's right.
I'm on page 4. Wait a minute, the things that we don't see.
Are the things that we experience.
Okay.
The distractions that we don't see are the distractions that we experience. Got that?
Yeah.
Okay. So the question begins with, what are the distractions that we do not see, but we experience? So I want to erase this. and put pleasure and the distraction that brings us pleasure that we experience, that we do not see, is the distraction that's subconscious. And that distraction is separation. We get pleasure from experiencing separation. How? That's what you want to say.
How?
How? We decide.
Yes.
This is how we do it. We do it. All these things don't matter, but we do it because we got 3 degrees and you have none. It's a subconscious thing. We only hang around people who are in our sorority. We say anything we want to people, and we be nasty as we want to be, but we think God will bless us anyway with all the wisdom that we need, right? We don't accept people's reasons for not doing things. We call them lies. Experiences. Are you with me? We have to change our attitude. We want to get back at everybody. Separation. Somebody pull out, you get for a parking place, and somebody pull in it just before you. And you're upset with them. Separation. Because now you think they did you wrong, so they're worse than you. That's separation. I was riding with someone, and that happened. Actually, I was driving, pulled into the parking place, somebody pulled in, I backed out, and they raised hell. And I'm like, why are you doing that? Why are you doing that? There's another parking place someplace. If not, we just ride till we found one. So we found a better parking place. And I said, let me tell you something. Every time I come to the VA early in the morning, it is extremely difficult to find a parking place. But when I see someone pull into a parking place in front of me, I keep it moving. I always find a parking place, and I'm never late for an appointment because it doesn't bother me. So these ideas of separation comes in different. It makes you feel like you're better than them because I wouldn't have done that. Yes, you would have. The only reason you might not have done it then is because you moved from where you were. But for the grace of God, there goes you too. Am I making sense? I'll give you another one. Separation. I want to be around it, but you have to look at them like you look at yourself. I went to the VA the other day, and I had to park on around by the regional office. And on the other side of the regional office, they have this glass canopy, this glass little enclosure built for people to smoke. And they got a little exhaust on top of it. And I'm like, boy, they sure would do great lengths for people to be able to smoke and not smell their own smoke. I mean, it's crazy, but they did it. Now, I could have just looked down on the people doing that because I don't do it. But my first impression was hoping that they would get to the place where they realize they're killing themselves. That's it. I'm not saying that. Am I making sense so far?
When you get to the hospital.
Now, yeah, separation. But in the right place, they fall out the table stairs. Separation. Here we are, right? Separation. Separation covers a whole lot of stuff. Education, money, where you live in terms of neighborhood, the way you dress, the way you speak to people, all kinds of things. Your attitude, your emotions about things, all kinds of things. And do not tell me, when I say to you, we need to get beyond this idea of separation, don't tell me I ain't got there yet. I don't want to hear it. You know why? The reason you haven't gotten there yet because you don't want to. You can separate from anything you want to separate from. If you desire it bad enough, you can do it. I have had someone tell me, I can quit smoking when I get ready. I said, you can't. Yes, I can. So are you telling me you want to die? No, I'm not. You know what smoking has done to folks in your family, but you still want to smoke. Well, I'm going to quit. No, you can't quit. I can do anything, prove it. They still smoking. Because they don't believe they can do anything. But yet, they believe that they have arrived along this journey where they can see enough light to bring light to everybody else. You can bring some, but not where you would be if you separate yourself. When you see those things that you need to be separated from in order to be connected to mankind. Am I making sense? Because when you separate yourself from these things, they die. You stop giving life to them. Think about it this way. If I stop smoking, maybe somebody else will see me and start too. Right?
Mm-hmm.
So, the most hidden vesture of separation is racism. When we realize that racism is the most hidden area of separation, because no one that I know of or that I'm aware of has taken the time to try and understand where it came from. We can read and we can find that Columbus imported it into Europe. But I'm talking about, where did it come from? If Columbus imported it into Europe, it had to be in him, didn't it? Where did it come from? How did it get to him? Simply because he saw some people that were different than him? It had to be greater than that. If everything is spiritual, it has a spiritual origin, right?
Mm-hmm.
So, as we said in the past, when Adam, this entity, because he's not man, when this entity made a decision to move away from Eden as opposed to moving into Eden, when this entity made a decision to do that, it entered a place of darkness, didn't it? Hello?
Yeah.
And that darkness, that place of darkness, is also chaos, right?
Yeah.
Or confusion, misunderstanding, lack of understanding, those things, okay? He lost his sense of understanding of who he is or who it is. And when it did that, it even lost of sense of what it was created to be and how it was created. And when it lost a sense of how it was created, the things that were different in it divided them. Got that, Barbara? The things that were different in it, and the reason I want you to make sure you got that, because this is the first time I'm saying this right now. The things that were different inside of it separated them. He saw, or it saw that there was a difference between feminine and masculine. It saw that there was a seed and there was a womb. You see what I'm talking about? It saw that. Mm-hmm. And it saw that the seed and the womb was in it. It saw that the method of inserting that seed into that womb for nourishment to create new life and to bring about a wealth of knowledge, a wealth of wisdom and understanding, creating a royal priesthood, it saw that and separated it. Male and female. Can you see that? When it separated it, it did something else. It moved in its thought processes so far away from what it was created to be until it showed up as a man in dark skin. Anthropologists say the first man came from where? Africa. Can you see that? That's how it showed up. As what we call a man in dark skin. And that darkness represented the confusion. And the further it moved away from what it was created to be, the more thoughts began to emanate from it, and it began to manifest itself in different races. And these races represented the thoughts of separation that emanated from the confusion that was in this entity. Are you still with me? What is it? Oh, I see that in your head. What is it?
I'm wondering though if the darkness in this sense of the skin is not essentially related to confusion, but it's more that it's a, what's the word I'm looking for? It's just not a reflection, that's not what I want to say. But it's part of
It's the shadow.
him, well, but also him absorbing the light.
Okay. Okay, I can see that. I see what you're saying. I see
He's
where you're
absorbing the light, and then as he moves further away, he's no longer absorbing the light, he's reflecting the light.
So
So he's not taking it into himself anymore.
So
He's
what
reflecting
happened?
it.
He absorbed the light at this point. And then
Well, he was absorbing it all along, but as he came into the being of a man, that's why the skin was dark.
because the light that
As he got further and further away, thoughts became more scattered, he started to reflect the light.
and that's where the races came from.
Yeah.
Would that be the concept of colors being that black is
Yeah.
all colors?
It's all
And then the
colors.
further you go away, white becomes
Yes.
devoid of colors.
Yes. And white also becomes the light that he created.
Right,
The
because
light that he created.
he's not accepting and absorbing
Right.
the light from the Creator anymore.
So he created his own.
Yeah.
And the Caucasian became the light that he created. And that is the reason he looks to the Caucasian for everything that he believes to be right and true. And I don't care how you look at it. That's what we do. We say we don't, but I tell you what you do. Don't work for any white people. Don't live in any property that white people have any interest in.
That's impossible.
You see what I'm talking about? Because this light is not about people, it's about consciousness. Has become the light. This light has become the provider and the preserver for everything that we see. Just like the light of the Creator is the provider and preserver for everything we were created to be. Can you see that?
Yeah.
Now,
So it's sort of like we're looking to this artificial light now.
yes, that's exactly what it is. And that is the reason we allow this artificial light to define what worship is. We allow that to happen. And when we stand and begin to teach as we do here, and this light that defines what worship is says that, well, preacher, you're preaching a dangerous doctrine there. That's what I was told. You're going to take a lot of people to hell with you. That's what I was told. Why? Because it's not what you see. And then when I went to the book and said, but this is what the book says, the response was, that's okay, but. In other words, that's what the book says, but I'm the light. And I can't argue with that because I made you the light. I'm a part of that. I made you the light. You became the light, and you want to remain the light. You know you're not the light if you really look at it. You see where I'm coming from?
Mm-hmm.
This is the manifestation of these thoughts. So the moment that we begin to buy into the concept of racism, what we actually do, we actually perpetuate the light and we give life to it. So the more we talk about a racist joke that a judge told concerning Obama, the more we give life to that. But the moment we say it means nothing, it matters not. Because the Creator is in charge of everything. The only thing that matters is light. The moment we begin to say that, then we begin to take the life out of it. It is no different than the kid in school who has a cleft palate, and the kids pick on that child. And that child says, I'm different than you, but it's okay. I'm also smarter than you. And keep saying that, now they stop picking at the kid about the cleft palate. Because it doesn't affect it. Are you following me? Mm-hmm. When you stop allowing things to adversely affect you, they die. So when we stop allowing the racist comments to adversely affect us, they die. And I know what you're saying. Oh, that's so hard. Yes, it's hard. But it's even more difficult to live a lie. And the lie that we've been living is that we see the light, and they calling the light that we see the light here in terms of beginning, when actuality is here in terms of the light we created. It's time to stop living the lie. The other thing about this thing about racism, when we bring it to a place of death, it is then that all of this becomes one. And when it becomes one, it ends up right here at beginning. Can you see that? It ends up at beginning. Every one of these races that I have here, all the races have what we call different cultures. But when you drill down beneath all what we call the cultural differences, we find that we are exactly the same. These cultural differences are simply distractions that have been created to keep us from seeing our way to the true light. As long as I see you as a Japanese and someone as a Chinese and someone as a Caucasian and someone as an Egyptian, someone as this and that, as long as I see those things, those outward appearances, I never get to the place where I see who I am. Because I see who I am as opposed to who you are, rather than seeing who I am based upon who you are, because we are the same. We are the same, not in opposition to each other. We are exactly the same. Why is it that we are so different yet? If Vermel has a baby and that baby is reared in China, that baby will speak Chinese and act like a Chinese, right? Mm-hmm. But if we're so inherent,
think like a Chinese,
and think, yes, and if we're so inherently different, that shouldn't happen. That should not happen if we're so inherently different. But we're not. We have given thought to this. Now, let me hasten to say, don't you think for 1 minute that because your skin is dark, that you are superior to what has come out of you as thought. That's not what I'm saying at all. as a matter of truth, the reason that we are, quote unquote, at the bottom of the totem pole is because we have been weakened by losing the truth of our essence, by scattered thoughts. Are you with me?
Yes.
We've been weakened by that. When I say we, I'm not talking about the African, I'm talking about the entity Adam has been weakened by that. Adam was weakened when this came into being, African. African weakened further when the other races came into being. Weakened even further when the light was created. You see? And the weakest of them all, guess what the weakest of them all is? The one that appears to be the strongest is the weakest of them all, the light. The artificial light is the weakest of them all. Because it thinks that nobody is right except it. It thinks that it has the answers to everything. Doesn't it? Hello.
Yeah.
So how do we bring it back? How do we get this back? The way it comes back is by us allowing racism to die. And when I say us, I'm talking about the ones towards whom racism is cast. It's thrown towards us, isn't it?
Yes.
Rather than accept it and embrace it and say, poor old me, why you say it to me? Look at it and say, that's not who I am, and I feel sorry for you, and keep it moving. Why? Because the children of the light are beginning to see that the light is not always right. So the children of the light put some tents up in a park in New York and said, the things that you call great and successful are not great and successful. It is destructive.
Well, that's what the lady did to Rush Limbaugh, too, because she said to him that, the words you used toward me are the same words men have used for centuries to subjugate women.
Yes.
And she said, I will not be silenced.
Yes. And what did she do? She's killing the idea of a woman who desires contraceptive in a slut.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And I do not want the advertisers to stop supporting Rush Limbaugh. It is my desire that he stays where he is. Because if he does not regurgitate what the rest of them feel, we won't be able to destroy it.
That's true.
If the snake is in the hole, you can't get to him. But the moment he comes out the hole, you can handle it. Are you with me?
Yes.
So we have to recognize the necessity of what other people recognize as pain. That's not destructive, what he said. It gives us an opportunity to be constructive. It gives us an opportunity to construct a new frame, a new way, a new method of approaching it, of looking at it, of dealing with it. Does it not?
Right.
In the past, when we have come face to face with racism, we have fought it tooth and nail, right? Mm-hmm. But the more, it's like your child. The more you tell your child not to do something, the more they're going to do it. Don't go to Bessie Club, because they shoot down there. Right, but they sent your child down there. I mean, but you see where I'm coming from?
Yeah.
But the moment you say, you know what, that's where you need to be. Mom not be no fun now, because mom and dad want to go down. Yeah. I mean, that's how we think. And of course, that's simplicity in nature. But the principle is what I'm trying to get you to see. Am I making sense?
Yes.
So the place of discomfort is the place where we need to be. So right now I sense, as I said from the onset, the comfort of most of the people I cover, but a discomfort in me. Not a discomfort that causes me to lie awake at night, but one, have you ever been planning to take a trip that you really want to take? And the night before the trip, you're anxious about it. You know, you're ready to go. And then you try to sleep at night, but you can't get is the morning yet, that kind of thing. That's how I feel. I feel like there is another step to take on this journey. And I feel the anticipation of the next move. So it's not an antagonizing thing. It's not a negative thing at all. It's something that I embrace. Because for the first time, I am more accepting of who I am and what I must do than I've ever been in my entire life. And more willing to do whatever it takes to bring about an awareness of who we are than I have ever been in my entire life. I'm more willing to do it. So, with all of that said, the idea of moving away from the religion is more imperative than we ever dreamed. And you do not move people away from religion by condemning them or looking down on them or talking to them like they're stupid. You do it by the way you live. You get that sandwich at one, did you? So, any questions before I go on? So, this seeking is extremely important. Extremely important. You don't find that kingdom in anyone except you.
So does not everything comes out of that one scripture?
Yes. Now, well, the scripture, the thing that precedes that scripture is a verse that says, you cannot serve God in materialism too. You go love one and hate the other. It says that you cannot submit to Elohim and materialism. And you're going to have a greater, one is going to become a wound for what's birthed in you more so than the other. That's exactly what it's saying. Okay.
So saying, and also we can't serve spiritual.
How many of you this week have been angry?
Angry?
Yeah, seriously.
Last night.
Mine was last night.
Angry. This week's, in the last 7 days, how many of you been angry about something?
Oh, yeah.
How long did it last?
No.
How many of you have been upset about something this week?
Yeah.
How long did it last? How many of you this week have had something that happened in your life that you would like to change or have back? That you would like to do differently? Seriously.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Do you know why those things happen in your life? The anger, the upset, and the things that you wish you could have back or that you could change? It's to tell you it's time for you to do it. You don't have to be angry. You don't have to be upset. You don't have to say or do things that you wish you could change or have back. You don't have to do that. The reason it's done is because we don't think before we act. And we don't think before we think. If you think before you think, it helps you avoid anger. If you think before you think, it helps you avoid anger. Anger comes from you thinking about something. It doesn't matter whether it's a split second or a long period of time. It comes from you thinking about something. Most of the time we get upset because we're looking at other people rather than ourselves. How do we combat that? From this day forward, let's make a conscious effort. Anger doesn't change anything except you, right?
Mhm.
Being upset doesn't change anything. And saying or doing hurtful things doesn't change anything. Once it's out, it's out. Once you blow the smoke out of your mouth, it's gone. You can't take it back. Right?
True.
So, let's keep the genie in the bottle. How do we do that? If you feel something rising, because you know when you get angry, you feel it in here first. Take a deep breath and let the negative energy go. If you feel you're getting upset about something, ask yourself, why is this upsetting me? If you feel like you want to say or do something to someone that's going to get back at them, that's going to hurt them, or that they've done something to you, if you feel like that, think 5 minutes before you speak. Think 5 minutes before you write it. You know what I'm saying? Just think about it before you do it. And while you're thinking about it, ask yourself this. Would I want the same energy to be directed to me? Because no matter what anyone says or does to you, it's your fault. You need it. Deal with it.
What if the person that you're mistreating is you?
Then you have to learn to love you so you can stop mistreating you. Talk to you about how much you love you. Ask yourself why you mistreat you. Why do you don't like yourself? What is it about you you need to fix? And fix it. It's not easy, but it's necessary. That's where we are now. That's where we are. We've crossed the bridge. And now, I realize more than ever what was meant when Peter said, if we leave you, to whom will we go? If you leave, the enlightenment that delivers, where else will you find deliverance? Where will you find it? If you walk away from who you are right now, you will never be able to find who you once were, because that doesn't exist anymore. The only thing that you will find is emptiness. This I'll leave you with. If you can walk away from who you are right now and find who you once were, you have never changed. You've always been that person. You never changed. Your lip service changed, but you didn't change. Because if you ever changed, what you once were is dead. Can you see that?
Say that again. If you walk away from who you are right now
And find who you were before you became who you are.
Okay.
You never changed.
Okay. Okay.
You never changed. That is the reason. It doesn't matter what congregation you go in, you'll find the same thing. Religious people can fit into any congregation. They know how to respond. They know when to respond. They know when not to respond. Especially those who, like when we were little, you're there when they open, you're there when they close. You're there during the week. Boy, I used to hate that. Yeah, well, my God, you're not going to track practice today. You're going to practice your Easter speech. You got this Easter program that you got to do. So you're not going to track practice. Those kind of things.
You had a speech when you were in track.
Now, I had a play.
Oh,
When
play.
I did do a
Oh.
speech, they were like, yes.
Oh,
I
okay.
did. I was an orator in my church.
Before y'all get too far, I need you to repeat that one more time. What you said. If you walk away from who you are right now
And find who you were.
and find who you were,
You have never changed. You've only spoken it through your lips. You're giving it lip service.
I kind of need clarity on that. I mean,
If
maybe
you were,
I'm just-
okay, if you were a jackass last week, and I ain't talking about you, I'm talking about just clarity. If you were a jackass last week, and now you're not a jackass, and you say that I would never do those things again, and I would never be like, you know what I'm saying? Because then you're not comfortable with them. Now when you go back, you can't find the jackass that you were. You see? I mean, it's really simple. If you were promiscuous, you were a party hopper, if you were sharp-tongued, if you were mean-spirited, all those things. If you were that. If you always look for an opportunity to hurt somebody's feelings. If you waited for an opportunity to get back at somebody. If you always wanted to one-up somebody, right?
Mhm.
And if you say that is not who I am anymore, if you decide to walk away from who you say you are right now, and you find all of that, you didn't change. You just gave lip service to change.
Okay. Yeah, okay.
Okay, can I be,
said something
can I be
about
blatant?
because it would have died.
Can I be
or
blatant?
something?
Well, yeah, because
Okay, now, I ain't talking about you, but I'm
Yeah.
just gonna be blatant.
Mhm.
Okay, if you're a hoe, and you decided I ain't gonna be no hoe no more, right? The Lord done changed my life, right?
Mhm.
Now, you decide that here I am, I'm with the Lord. Then one day you get upset because something happened, and you say, I'm not going to go back to being what I was. And you go back to being a hoe, and you're there, right?
Mhm.
You never changed. The only thing changed was your location. Your heart didn't change. Your emotions didn't change. You were a hoe sitting there saying, I love the Lord. And I hate to be that blatant with it, but that applies to anything in our lives that is adverse to who we are supposed to be. It doesn't matter whether it's a robber, or a crackhead, or whatever.
Mhm.
All of it, if you go back to that, you never changed. You just gave lip service to change.
and see, I was looking at that totally different, I guess, and that's why
Come on,
it's
talk to me.
clicking with me. If you walk away from who you are right now, whatever that is, in all of its seeming perfection or imperfection, whatever
Whatever
that
it is.
and find who you were. And the word I was looking at was
This word.
who I was.
Yes. And that's not the one I'm talking about.
Okay.
That's
See
not
that-
the one I'm
see,
talking
and then when you gave the example to Evelyn, that just really, I said,
Yeah,
oh,
that's not the one I'm
oh,
talking about.
oh,
I'm talking, remember the scripture I said in the beginning. Peter says to Jesus, if we leave you, to whom will we go?
Okay.
That's where I started from, remember?
Right.
Mm-hmm.
And based upon that scripture, he's not talking about that. You know, what we were created to be. What he's talking about is who they were before they started walking with him.
Okay.
That's what he's talking about.
The word then is the same situation that you were in.
Yes, the religious, the street stuff, whatever it was. So that's where I'm coming from based upon that scripture, not based upon who we were created to be. Okay?
Okay, well, I'm not gonna write that down because I thought you were giving me something.
No. First of all, we don't ever go back to who we were created to be. Ever. you realize who you were created to be. You become aware of that because you never left it. You never stopped being it.
See, now you're talking again. See, now
Now,
you
let me show you what I'm saying.
Yeah.
I
Now
know,
I'm talking about
I
that.
know.
Yeah. So you never, you can't, in other words, you can't destroy what God created.
Well, nothing is destroyed.
You can hide it. You can act like you don't see it. You can act like it's not real to you. But you cannot destroy it.
But my point is, you can see the statement that you made both ways,
You're right.
which is to really
You're right. The only difference in the two is
psyching me out.
whether or not I say created to be or what Peter said. That's the only difference in the two. The statements are exactly the same.
You're right. Yeah, you're right.
Oh, you say the principle the same?
The principles are exactly the same, but the foundation of them are different.
Right. Yeah.
Well, that makes sense too.
So if I say this, if you walk away from who you are right now and find who you were and leave just like that, you've never changed. But I can also say if you walk away from who you are right now and find who you were created to be, you've never changed. That's still true.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You
Oh, that's so deep. Now I'm
Yeah.
big. Now
Yeah.
I'm okay. Now we.
Yeah.
You know.
Yeah.
So that supports what we were saying earlier about it all being an illusion, that we really haven't moved anywhere in time.
Yes. Everything's an illusion. Let me tell you something. That is one of the very reasons you don't ever get to the place where you think you have arrived. Where you think where you can say, I will never ever.
Mm-hmm.
Because the never ever is tomorrow for you.
Exactly. Yeah.
You can say what I desire not to be or do, but you never ever, never say never. Now, the other thing is that you cannot say that I desire to move away from everything that's religious and walk into all of those things that I was created to walk in. When you say that, you are opening up a can of worms that you do not understand. Because you will walk in areas that you feel like you are the dirtiest thing on earth. Or that you feel like you're wrong, or that you feel, because there will be times when you will say things or do things that everyone around you will look down on, and you know that you're doing it because of who you created to be. That's one of the reasons you have no right to condemn anybody. Because you don't know what it takes for them to see who they are.
Sure.
That guy said to me, the man who blew his head off in front of the white thingy, he said to me when I did the funeral, I said to them, be very careful how you look at what he did. Because you don't know what shoes he was walking in. Be very careful how you judge him. It's no different than the man who has tremendous pain. And all of a sudden he starts drinking, trying to wash the pain away, becomes an alcoholic, and he dies. And everybody who looks at him thinks that he went to hell because he was an alcoholic. But you walk in his shoes and see how you were handled. That's all I'm saying. Because when you judge me, you're judging you. You don't know how I am supposed not only to get to this place of beginning, but to get you there. You don't know. This entity desires to cease seeing the differences or the separateness of who he is. This entity desires to see the necessity of both so it can become what it was created to be. But religion has said, there is a separateness that will never be brought back again. But that's not what the scriptures say. Image and likeness, or image rather, created in this image, being this entity. How can you tell me that being created in this image is this entity, and this is what we desire to be, but yet we go be separated? That's crazy. This whole thing, why did Jesus say that there will be none given in marriage or taken in marriage when you get enlightened? Why did he say that? Didn't he say that?
Yeah.
Why did he say that? Why did he say that when you become enlightened, there will be none given in marriage and none taken in marriage? Because you will understand that when you are enlightened, you will understand that this thing that we call marriage is so different than what we ever dreamed it to be. And the purpose of it is not to bring us physical pleasure, even though we get it out of it.
Mm-hmm.
The ultimate objective of it is to bring the pleasure of wisdom and enlightenment. That's the ultimate objective. The ultimate objective of this whole idea of marriage is not to perpetuate separateness, but to enhance the desire for oneness, for unicity. And when you realize that and you come together as one, what happens? What happens is the purpose and reason for this relationship that's coming together, when you become this entity in your heart, it spreads. And others began to see that there is a greater purity to an intimate relationship than they ever dreamed possible. They see it different. And people stop longing to be with somebody so they can legally sleep with them. Because relationship is much deeper than that. If you can't see the intimacy by being present, by thinking, by looking, there is no intimacy. It's just a physical connection, and it moves lateral as opposed to moving universally. Am I making sense?
Yeah.
And
For security purposes, this
and
call
then we
is
get to the place where we
terminated.
begin
Please
to ask.
contact.
So what happened? So what happened to these developed needs, desires, right? We created all of these physical developed desires. So what do we do with them? We have to learn what to do with them. What do we learn to do with them? We use them to bring light. That's what we do with them. That's what we do with them. You can't just lay with anybody. You can't do that. Just because you feel like you need to. You can't do that. Because when you do that, do you understand the sense of becoming one? Do you understand the seed? Not just the physical, but the spiritual seed that you're receiving that grows? This is very serious. Am I making sense?
Yeah.
This is very, very serious. Religion, as we know it, has messed us up. But truth will clean us up and point us in the right direction. When Jacob finished wrestling with himself, he saw enlightenment coming to him and darkness leaving him. The latter reminds us that though our feet is in the earth, our upper parts are in the heavens. I'm done, unless there are questions. Okay? What is it, Bob?
Help us approach each other in this light. When we judge others, we judge ourselves. When we know others, we know ourselves. When we love others, we love ourselves. Amen.
Maybe